Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by a longtime friend of the channel and personal friend to Ashley and I, Shyheem Pyatt-Leonard. Shyheem, how you doing today?
I'm great, Ken. How are you?
I am doing so well. It is amazing to finally have you here. You've been a good friend of the channels for a long time. We've had you on a live stream before. It was just time to actually finally make this happen. Now, before we talk about why you're here, Shyheem, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are the creator of Shyheem of the Dead YouTube channel. You are an autobiographical gothic horror poet, artist, YouTuber, and TikTok creator of Shy Talks. Now, when you're doing these things, like I said, you got the TikTok, YouTube, Shy Talks, which is what you call them. How long have you been doing this for?
I've been doing it since 2021. I think it's been like nearly almost 2 years now.
Yeah, dude, and it's so amazing, like the level of intricacy that goes into what you do, and like because you also do like gothic music video poetry with inspirations from horror films, varieties of music, and your poems are all based on like personal traumas and griefs that you've gone through and how that you process them and how you deal with those. So what gave you the desire to actually go, you know what, I'm going to start posting this stuff to try to be an outlet to help other people?
Well, I mean, I've been really influenced by writing my whole life. I've been that writer with a lot of imagination as a kid. I spent a lot of time like in front of a television, just watching like horror and all kinds of things that are, for me, really like influential to my imagination. And my imagination was just so wild, and I was always that, nerd in class obsessed with aliens, zombies, and ghosts. And then it got to a point as I got older, I just stopped writing fiction because I was at a place in my life where a lot has happened and a lot of experiences, bad or good. And I kind of taken those, and I've never had the opportunity to really sit with my emotions and like
Yeah.
process them, because I was always taught, school first, have fun later. It was always like that back and forth of my brainwave of training. So I don't know. I think in high school it was like a shift. I decided to just start writing about myself. And as I got older as an adult, I'm now 25. So now I've decided to just write autobiographical poems about my trauma and my past. And I watched this one show that dealt with the characters, like their 5 stages of grief. It was called WandaVision. It was on Marvel. And I watched that show and I thought, you know what? That's what's missing. I need to kind of like just snap into that 5 stages of grief, but do it in a more colorful way. That's not, like from denial to acceptance. It's all about pretty much a rainbow of seeing the beauty of the horror in a human psyche, which in this case is mine. So I decided to do a whole channel based around that.
And the good thing about all this, not only do I have the YouTube, the TikTok, all of Shyheem's social medias are down in the description. So make sure you're subscribing to YouTube, follow on TikTok, Instagram, so you can stay up to date on all these things. So how often would you say you post all your different things?
It's funny because I have like a work schedule. So it's basically like a random time where I'm really feeling like, okay, if I'm done with work, I would usually like work on weekends, and I would post them mostly on a Sunday, whether it's Shy Talks or my poems in general on video. So, I mean, this week I'm trying to get right back into the poems because I've spent this month of May just working on Shy Talks again. And what's funny about that too is that I have like a routine for each of them. I'll take 1 month off doing my poems after working on them for 1 month, and I'll go to the Shy Talk TikTok videos, and I'll spend 1 month doing those, and I'll hop right back to doing poems. And it's a good routine because I'll often get worn out by one of them. So then I'll come right back and still have that same passion for doing, continuing to tell my creative story each way. So it's
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. When you do that, it really helps to stop the burnout.
Right.
So I completely understand why you would want to go back and forth between the two, not just sticking with one all the time. It helps you to not get burned out when you're going back and forth between doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
you
I
said
did want to. Oh, go ahead.
I know. I was just saying, like you pretty much said it perfectly. Like that's pretty much like my routine for each um, content. And then I also had this third idea on my community tab, where like I basically go down memory lane of each poem, and I talk about what influenced me from them, how I was feeling at the time that I wrote them. They're not necessarily videos; they're like pictures of the poems that you see on the videos by themselves, but they're like in paper forms.
Right. Well, and like you said, you do have a lot of horror influences to go along with those. There's nothing scarier than what we go through with anxiety, depression, or past traumas. So I could see why you would be more attracted to some of these horror elements of things when you're trying to get this, the horror out of yourself. So um I can't urge you guys enough. Make sure you are following everything Shyheem does. All those links are down in the description, because maybe if you're going through something, you can read some of his poems, watch some of the videos, and maybe they can help you with your own personal trauma to help you get through some things. So we talked about what you're doing now, Shyheem, but for a second here, my friend, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Shyheem, the first horror movie that you watched was.
Now, what's funny about this is my mother told me that it was actually Friday the 13th, part five. But what's funny also about that is that I have no memory of watching it. But my first horror movie that I would personally remember watching at a very young age is Bride of Chucky.
And the good thing about that is what a start to the horror genre. Chucky, Tiffany, getting that whole, it really is a good gateway because it's not completely horror, but it's horror enough to scare you and want you to get into the genre. So do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen Bride of Chucky?
Well, before I get into that, I just want to say that what personally connects me to Bride of Chucky more than any other like horror movie in that kind of day and age of time that it was released is that the original Child's Play was 1988, right? And that was
Mhm.
like 10 years before I was born. Bride of Chucky was 1998. I was born during the year that it came out. So
Right.
Bride of Chucky is a special place to that connection. But yeah, like moving into the story, I can't really recall what age. I just remember being really, really young with a visceral of imagery of that movie. Like I remember almost every scene of the movie at a really young age, which is really kind of creepy. I don't know what that says, but it was indelible for me.
Well, and it's a movie that, like I said, at a young age especially, there's enough comedy to make it so you're not completely terrified throughout the whole movie, but it's still scary enough to stick with you and latch onto your brain. So, do you remember who you were with the first time you had watched it?
I had to have been at my grandmother's house. It was at night, and I remember being on her recliner, laying on her recliner. I think all of my siblings were asleep, and we were like on vacation at her place. And I remember this movie, Last Dragon, that was like in the 80s, 1980s. I think somewhere around that time was, yeah, it was released. So that movie was just finished, and then Bride of Chucky came on right afterwards on the Stars program that they had back in the day. And I remember watching just like the first scene of like seeing like the Freddy glove, the Jason mask, um, the Leatherface's chainsaw, and it was just like really gothic, dark imagery that. And as the movie went, Jennifer Tilly, she striked a really striking image with the whole gothic tone of bringing Chucky back as well. And I just remember being really creeped out by the Chucky doll itself. That was like my first introduction to Chucky with his scarred look.
Right. Because this is the first time we get that Chucky with the scarred look.
Mhm.
In Child's Play 3 is when he falls into the fan, and we get the fan ending of Child's Play 3, which cuts him to pieces. And this is where we really get the stitched up Chucky look. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you were talking about a lot of effective scenery throughout the film. It's got a lot of gothic scenery, a lot of scary scenery. But do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
I mean, pretty much Chucky himself. I mean, just from that scarred look, because I've had numerous nightmares in the past during that time, just from seeing his scarred look, like it traumatized me for life. But definitely the scene that affected me the most was Glenn's birth scene at the end of the movie. Like to this very day, when I watch that movie, anytime I think about Bride of Chucky, one of the first things I think about is that birth scene. Because it's like, who had the idea that Ryan is amazing at what he can create when it comes to Chucky, and that birth scene was just out of nowhere, and it still creeps me out to this very day.
Oh, traumatizing. And when you see little Glenn Glenda for the first time, it's just a
Oh,
traumatizing scene, and as a child, especially because childbirth, as a child, you don't really understand childbirth and sexual things like that anyway, So when you see something like that as a child, it's supposed to be a stork brought the baby, or we got you from the hospital. But you see the birth and then you see the monster come out. Like I'm sure that had to stick with you for a very long time.
oh yeah, and it was like really bloody and disgusting. And you're right, like that was like my first introduction to like what birth is like. I'm like, what am I watching?
Right. Right. And
That
it
was
really does, like, as long as you get the education to go along with it, I feel like horror in general can really be an educational platform of entertainment because you're going to get a lot of different things. But as long as you're educated properly to go along with it, I feel like it really is a healthy outlet. So we know which scene affected you the most, Shyheem, but Bride of Chucky is a very well known movie, and lots of people love this movie to death. Which scene would you say is your favorite scene from the film?
Ooh, you know what? That's pretty easy. I mean, I love the whole film in general. It's a masterpiece, but I think my favorite scene is just that opening of Tiffany walking to her trailer and the Rob Zombie music playing in the background as like the kickstart of the entire movie. I think that's like my favorite scene. And I mean, in general, Jennifer Tilly's physical form throughout half of the first act of the movie, yeah, from Rob Zombie to that whole first act of the movie where she's in physical form and we get to see Chucky and Tiffany, Jennifer Tilly like just interact for the first time. It's really funny and hilarious, but it's also very creepy.
When you see her in the bathtub watching Bride of Frankenstein, and then you get Chucky pushing the TV in on her, like that's amazing. Obviously as young boys, I was like, whoa, this lady's beautiful and she's getting in the bath. Score. And then you watch it now and you know what's happening. And you're like, oh no, this is gonna be terrible. This is, like this is the minute you see her get in the bath, you're just like, this is not gonna end well for her. So Bride of Chucky, part of the Child's Play franchise, which is a huge franchise now. Would you say, because this is your first horror movie, would you say that Bride is your favorite in the Child's Play franchise? And if not, which one is?
Oh hell yes, it's my favorite. I mean, it was born during it came out during the year I was born. So and like I said, there's a whole connection between the first movie and that movie being so connected to the date wave of my birth. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, and it's the first Chucky movie that I've ever seen. So it
Right.
holds a special place. That being said, though, Curse of Chucky is my second favorite in the series because after Bride and growing up, I've seen like Seed at a really young age too, and that really traumatized me to a point where I kind of stayed away from the franchise. I still watched it, but I was like trying to get over my fear of the doll for years. And then as I was old enough in high school, Curse of Chucky came around, and I really had a newfound respect for the franchise afterwards because Fiona Dorff was involved, and knowing that she was Brad Dourif's daughter, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is like a family affair. And so I went back and just watched all the Child's Play films and thought, wow, this is good. And I'm glad that I have that kind of like complicated relationship with Chucky that I've had for years, and it still is complicated because it's still like he still kind of scares me deep in my mind somewhere in a small
Oh
space.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you're talking about, Curse. You watch, if you watch a three, if you watch these three right in a row, you watch Bride, Seed, and Curse. Curse is going to scare the shit out of you. Like, Curse goes back to being very scary, very dark, a lot of gothic scenery throughout that film too. So I know what you're talking about with that. But with Bride, there is not a lack of great kills in the movie. And Bride has some of the coolest kills in the franchise. But which kill would you say is your favorite from Bride of Chucky?
Ooh, that is a good question. You know what? The Tiffany throwing the wine bottle up to the glass, and the glass just like falling on those couple in their room. I think that's my favorite one. And
Yeah.
they recall that kill right back in Call to Chucky with the compressed machine that Chucky had. Yeah.
Yes. And it's amazing because Bride of Chucky was still okay being bloody and scary. Like, you have the lip ring kill. Like, that's one that always stuck with me. Like, when she rips the lip ring out and sits the pillow on his face. Like, that whole scene to me is just like, ugh. Like, that's such a gnarly death scene in Bride of Chucky. So, and then like you said, you have the champagne bottle and all the water, the water from the waterbed after the glass falls on it. Just a beautiful scene. Like, it really is beautifully shot, a great looking scene. So, Shane, we talked about your first horror movie being Bride of Chucky and what that means to you. But now, as always, my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Shyheem? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
That is a crazy question because I have so many. But if I have to like choose one that I can watch repeatedly over and over again, it would be 1997's Wishmaster.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah, Wishmaster holds a really special place too because it was one of the first horror films that I watched where, like Bride of Chucky, it striked this great balance of horror and comedy without being too like scary. And I watched it when I was younger, but I watched it at a great enough time where I was like in elementary. I had to have been like probably in fourth or fifth grade when I constantly kept watching that movie. And I know I probably seen it at a much younger age too, but just can't remember. I think around fourth or fifth grade was really the time where I kept constantly watching that movie and fell in love with the character of the Jinn Wishmaster, played by Andrew Duvall, who
Yeah.
really set really set the bar for that movie.
Which became its own, franchise. The Wishmaster franchise, and very underrated film. I haven't heard very many people talk about their love for Wishmaster, so that's awesome, man. Well, Shane, I've had an amazing time hanging out with you, talking about your first horror movie, your favorite horror movie, as well as what you do on social media, which you guys can check out by clicking the links in the description. But before we go, Shane, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to bounce back to Bride of Chucky. And what we're going to do is we're going to rank this movie on a skull count. Now, as always, Shane, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. What we're doing here is strictly ranking Bride of Chucky on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Shane, what would your ranking of Bride of Chucky be?
Well, before I give my ranking, I just want to say, Ken, like that's how I feel on a daily basis when I watch a horror movie. I'm like, I'm not looking for like, Oscar nominee performances. I'm just looking to
Right.
have a fun time. And so with Bride of Chucky, it's with that kind of allure of, fun and horror, but it's not enough to scare me. That being said, though, I will give Bride of Chucky of how much it affected me a solid 5 Chucky stabs on the skull out of 5 of how much.
See, and when you say that you remember it scene for scene, I was pretty sure we were going to be high up there on the ranking. But on top of that as well, though, what you were just saying, when I go into a horror movie, all I want is to be entertained. Like that's all I want. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking. I don't need to be blown away by every shot. Like, just entertain me. That's all I want. Make me want to see what's happening next. So I completely agree with you on that. Shame again, everybody. We are at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But it's the third time I'm going to say it. Third time's a charm. All of Shaheem's links are down in the description. So make sure you're subscribing and following on social media. Make sure you become a part of his family. Check out the Shy Talks. Make sure you're included in everything he does because he's fucking amazing. And I'm so lucky to call him a friend. Shyheem, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. All our links are down in the description as well. And until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.